All right, we're recording for the description of our end-of-year portfolio. So again, students will complete a portfolio of images that uses each of the following camera and image editing techniques. All images must be enhanced, whether that's in Photoshop, Photo P, or maybe you're using a smartphone app like Photoshop Express, Photoshop Mix, or Photoshop Fix. You must show before and after image enhancement for each of these 10 photos. For each of these 10 photos, the first one will be our depth of field 1, which is an image with shallow depth of field. And again, shallow depth of field is where you have your subject in focus and either the foreground or background is out of focus. So going back to our fill obstruction reflection, your obstruction photos, that's where we had an obstructed view. And so that's where you had your foreground out of focus, focusing past it to your subject, which should be in focus. If you were maybe shooting this, so if you shot something, with a zoom lens, that typically would be more shallow depth of field, where just your subject's in focus and either background or foreground are out of focus and blurry. Or maybe you use the portrait mode on a smartphone and we're able to blur out the background. That would be your shallow depth of field for image number 1. Image number 2 is the exact opposite. This is with deep depth of field. That's where you should have everything in focus. So if you shot with like a wide angle lens, maybe like a landscape or outdoors where everything is pretty sharp front to back, and foreground, middle grounds, backgrounds all pretty sharp, that would be your deep depth of field. Most of you guys should have that, especially, for quite a few of these products. Maybe you did the landscape seascape option for fine art photography. Your freeze action would probably have some deep depth of field. So quite a few of those should have deep depth of field. Let me just click this. Some of you maybe had that in your design element photos with deep depth of field as well. So again, shallow depth of field is just one little section in focus. Deep depth of field, everything should be in focus, so pretty sharp. Your third photo is studio lighting. So image using strobe lighting in a studio environment. Obviously, you guys didn't have access to a strobe, but any sort of flash lighting would work with this. Or if you use like a handheld light indoors. So what I mean by that is maybe for the studio portraiture project, this would be one of those where hopefully you use some sort of, maybe portable light or indoor light or manipulated, some kind of indoor shooting with the light. It could also be your product photography as well, if you shot those indoors. Some of you guys maybe use window light. As long as you're manipulating the light and it looks like a studio shot, that'll be for that project because we didn't have, obviously, access to our lighting in studio, but that's what it would be in a normal year. Reflective lighting, this is where you use the reflector to, fill in the subjects or light your subject. And so that would be product photography. We did a white fill, bouncing some light. Studio portraiture, you could have bounced light in to fill in shadows. Your fill obstruction reflection, so your fill photos, that would be using some sort of white or silver fill to bounce in and light your subject, right? So that would be for that project, would work pretty well. Fill light is specifically filling in the shadows of a subject. So especially, with the fill project where you had the light behind your subject and then you filled in the shadow side with some sort of bounce fill, that would work. So those two are pretty close to each other. This one is more, if you were in class, you use those specifically a reflector. This one with the fill light, it could be a camera flash. So maybe you had the sun behind your subject and you lit them with the flash on the camera. That would work for fill light. Or it could be using a reflector to fill in the shadows too. Number 6, shutter speed 1, image freezing motion of a fast moving object or subject. So that would be your freeze action photography project, where you're trying to not show any motion blur. You're freezing the subject in motion using a fast shutter speed. And then your shutter speed 2, images using slow shutter speed to capture motion, blur, or movement. That would be our slow shutter long exposure. So if you did that one, you should be good to go. So I would just kind of pick the best one that you think shows either motion of a subject really well, or maybe did a cool night exposure or long exposure, or light painting, right? So we had lots of different ones you guys did. So that would be for that project. Lens selection. So ideally, if you're in the class, you'd be able to check out different lenses. So this one really comes down to if you used either on your smartphone or on a camera, like the wide angle setting to really capture the width of something, or you used a zoom mode to get closer to a subject, or maybe you shot really close to shoot macro. So really just if you use your smartphone lens in like a very specific way, that would work for this one. So again, maybe you shot super wide angle, maybe you shot with a zoom, maybe you shot really up close and macro and focus on something. That would be for this one. Obviously, you guys didn't have the same access to gear as you would a normal year. Number 9 is landscape or seascape. So this one, you should have some sort of landscape photo, whether if you did the fine art option or if you did the design elements photo option, should have had I've seen most of you guys turn in landscape photos. So any sort of scape, what we want to see is the rule of thirds composition. So if you have a horizon line, it's either on the bottom or lower, bottom third or upper third of the frame. Or if you had, vertical shot, you had some sort of vertical subject on the left or right third. So just using the rule of thirds composition for that landscape or seascape. So some of you maybe might not have that. What you can do is you could crop a photo to be rule of thirds, like maybe the horizon's in the middle, and then you crop it to move it down to the bottom third or the upper third. You could do that, or you could just go out and shoot one this week. And then the last one, number 10, is your digital enhancement image. So what I want to see is you guys create a new document that's 10 by 20 inches. So basically a wide, white document. And then I want you to drag over the before and then the after. So I would use your composite for this one if you've done your composite. But basically, we just want to see a strong digital enhancement. So you're doing a lot of retouching. You can see global changes to the before and after. Maybe did some healing with a healing brush or cloning, or compositing, or cut things out. But basically, you can really see a good difference between the before and after. So it shows some sort of mastery of using an editing program, whether that was Photoshop, Mix, Fix, or Express on the smartphone, or Photoshop or Photopea. And so later this week, I'll show you guys how to create a new document that's 10 by 20 at 300 ppi, and then basically just putting those images on it. So once you're finished, so you got your 10 images, you got before and afters of each of these. So you got the original and then the edited version of each of these, right? You're going to output it to 3,000 pixels. So basically, you're going to size them down to 3,000 pixels on the longest dimension. So again, if it was a wide crop, it'd be the width. If it was a tall crop, it'd be the height. If you can convert to sRGB, if you have Photoshop, I'm going to show it that way just so you can see it. That's what you do in a professional environment. But with Photoshop, the apps, you can't control the color profile. In Photopea, you can't. But if you have Photoshop, you can. And then make sure you're saving these as JPEGs. And then you're going to put this either on Flickr as a new album titled End of Year Portfolio, or you can create a Google Docker slide titled End of Year Portfolio. And then make sure you either turn in the link to the Flickr album, or you turn in your Google Docker slide into the Google Classroom and submit it for a grade. And then this is worth 100 points. I do have links for editing. I put the link for when we did our output to web. So I showed that for Photoshop, Photopea, and Pixlr, where we did outputting to the specific size. In the video, I outputted to 1,500 pixels. This one, you're just going to output it to 3,000 pixels, a little bit bigger. And then for the smartphone app using Photoshop Express on the smartphone, you can output to a specific pixel size. So you're just going to be putting 3,000 pixels on the longest dimension. So I put those videos from those demos. I will show that again this week, just so you know. And then I got other links on just online editors, using Pixlr, Photopea, and then Photoshop Mix and Fix and Express and all that good stuff. So I'm going to share some examples. So last year, students, had the kind of half, or I guess 2/3 year, where they had 2/3 in the classroom, and then a third where they, turned in work, at distance learning. Because of the issue, I didn't have as many turn it in, but I did want to share 2 examples from 2 students. All right. So Alyssa, she did hers and she labeled them. So this was the before and after of her shallow depth of field. So again, you can see in this photo, the background is blurred out, subject is in focus, that is shallow depth of field. You could also have your foreground out of focus, like your obstruction photo. This was her deep depth of field. So this one, ideally, you'd have this more sharp, but she had a good before and after. That's her digital enhancement. So let's go, what's the third photo on the list? Studio lighting. So we have this one. So this one she went on the Photo 360 event and was able to do, so she cleaned up her skin a bit and showed some healing on that, and also the clothing. But basically just using some sort of artificial light, whether that's, another smartphone light or flashlight or some sort of, artificial light that would work, or even a flash. This was used with the strobe flash. Reflective lighting, so using a reflector. So that was this one. You can see we had, one side filled in with the light source and then the fill. And this was the before and after. So she adjusted the colors, cropped it, and then removed some of the background. She removed that pipe behind her head. Pretty good job on that one. Fill light, so you could use camera flash or reflector to fill in the shadows. So that would be this one. This was for the studio portraits. This is before and after. She cleaned up the skin and just the exposure, did quite a good edit. And so that one, again, they were filling in. You can see the fill on this side, the shadow. That could also be your product photography, or that could be the fill obstruction reflection project where you filled in the shadows. Or if you use like a flash on the camera to fill in shadows, that would work too. Shutter speed 1, freezing fast motion. So we had, I think it was, yeah, this one. There's a before and after. So they were driving by and she froze that motion. And then our shutter speed 2, which was slow shutter speed, showing motion. She had her brother running with the soccer ball. And so she was trying to show that motion before and after. So more of a motion blur for that one. Lens selection, so you're using a specific kind of lens for a specific look. This one, not sure. Oh, I think she was able to use like a 50 millimeter, and it was like a shallow 50 or nifty 50 as they call it. So she got to use a specific lens at this event for this portrait, and she described that, in her descriptions. And then we have our landscape or seascape rule of thirds. So that was this one. So she put the horizon in the upper thirds. This is before and after. So really brought out the cool lighting here. She straightened her horizon, put it roll thirds. You could also put it at the bottom row thirds. That would work too. Nice composition. We got stuff in the foreground and background. And then the digital enhancement. So that was this one. So she created a new document. She did her before images, and then this was her composite. So basically she just took all the parts she used for her composite. So that would be your background layer, subject layer, and then the final version on the right. So that's how you could do that. So pretty good job on that. Abigail, so we had, these are all in alphabetical order. So let's see, let's go to our Shallow. Oh, here we go. So shallow depth of field is here. So this one, she used the portrait mode on her smartphone, blurring out the background. She actually got rid of the flyaway hairs here. This is before and after. Deep depth of field. So some sort of, landscape. This is before and after. She got rid of the cloud and the bird, and then cropped it and changed the colors a bit. And then we had our studio and reflective lighting. So let's go studio first. So this one, she was fortunate to shoot the indoor fashion with the studios here. So again, if you shot any sort of indoor with some artificial light or flashlight or flash on a camera, that would work for studio lighting. Reflective lighting, using a reflector to bounce. So that is this one. So this is for the portrait, and she bounced and filled in the side. You can see, the before and after. She cleaned up the skin and the shirt and the hair. And then for the fill light, you could use a camera flash or reflector. This one, she used a flash. So this was the flash before and after. So maybe you want to use a photo with your flash, you could use that. Shutter speed 1 and 2. So we had, I think this was her, yeah. So this was the freezing the motion. She took a picture of her sister jumping in the pool and then edited it. And then her long exposure, this was her before and after. So she used the smartphone app, slow shutter, to do this on a smartphone. And obviously this is before and after. It looks a lot nicer in the after. We had our lens selections. That one, she went more macro. So she went really up close. She actually rotated the photo and kind of brought the details and texture. And then the last one, or sorry, second to last is our landscape seascape. So that was this one. So this is before and after. So before was pretty centered, and after she brought it pretty close to rule of thirds. She was marked down just a teeny bit just because it was still kind of centered. Rule of thirds would be a little lower, but pretty close on her rule of thirds seascape and landscape. And then our digital enhancement photo number 10, that was this one. So again, she just did her composite. This was her background photo. This was her subject photo. She shot both of these with a smartphone, actually, and then her final composite on the right. So that was the last one. And again, all of these were outputted, and saved to 3,000 pixels on the long side. So any questions on that? I'm just going to stop the recording.